Evening, folks. And technically it is evening. Well, technically it's morning. It's after midnight. I'm just getting a few things sorted out so I can take a minor holiday from work. But this is going to be my review for the third episode of Tulsa King, which I just finished. It starts off, interestingly enough, with an explosion and a reference to a bit of a meme about the ATF. Those are, in fact, good boys. In any case, it introduces a character who is referred to, I thought initially, as Keel, partly because the captions are not really great. But as I understand it, the pronunciation of his name, though it's spelled Caolan, which to me looks like Cowlin, is pronounced Keel, or Keelan, or Keelan. It's kind of hard to get a feel for the Celtic spelling. It does appear to me to be an Irish name, not 100% sure. In any case, he appears to be some sort of, I suppose, Manson-esque figure. It's at least the way he's presented. Which, personally, as a bald white man with this mustache, this beard rather, I find a little bit irritating. But what are you gonna do? Anyway, one of the things that came to mind in watching that initial scene, and if you haven't seen the show, as always, I'll try to avoid spoiling it. But one of the things that came to mind in that initial scene was how Waltrip, and I'll call him Waltrip for the sake of this, seemed to have almost a Rasputin-esque hold on the mind of Dumont. Essentially, his word being a commandment, almost. And how that fellow didn't find himself arrested for interfering in an investigation or... Sorry, I just had to adjust my angle a little bit. In an investigation or a, I suppose, an incident or what have you, is a little bit beyond me. Again, it's a story beat. It's, he's got a bit of plot armor there for that. But moving on to the rest of the show, there's also now the previous subplot of Dwight's past somewhat coming back towards him. Or to hunt him, I guess. And as at this point in the show, the very beginning, he's still unaware of it. 1 second. And the fact that he's unaware of it is kind of interesting enough, but now adding in this biker militia-esque element makes me think that there's a possibility there may be too many plot threads being woven together in this. Possibly. But in looking at the way that, well, more accurately, in looking at the previously on segment, the recap, one of the things that struck me is how this isn't really a redemption story, and certainly not a coming of age or a, finding your feet sort of. Well, there is a little bit of that element of finding your feet to it. And I kind of played with coining a new term. I tried with things like coming of aging, coming of aged, but really it's more of a coming to terms story, where Dwight, being the horse out of the pasture, which is a lovely scene also in the beginning of the show, and actually some very good subtext in that quick interchange with the waitress, there's a solid element of the way that Dwight has to come to terms with his new environment, his new reality, is definitely that sort of story, like a sort of a coming to terms story. And we've seen different films and shows with this, where a character is aging or has to deal with the death of a loved one or whatever. And I think we could almost call these coming to terms stories. There is a really surprisingly good car chase for a TV show, in that it's somewhat reminiscent of the car chase in Ronin, the Robert De Niro movie, where it was very much reality focused. There was none of this, well, there was a little bit of the crazy, understeer, oversteer, swerve sort of stuff. But for a television production, it's not bad. It's actually very good. Though it's slightly unbelievable. Then again, it is a television show. It is meant to be escapist. But it is exciting enough to get the blood pumping. It's like, yeah, get him. Anyway. And as a result of this, there is a parallel drawn between him, Dwight, and Stacy Beale, the ATF agent, where essentially she addresses, and I believe it's actually stated openly in the dialogue of the show, addresses the elephant in the room, that they're both slightly crazy. Which is understandable, too. And of course, they end up sleeping together again. It's not really much of a spoiler. It's pretty clear she's going to be the romantic interest. It was kind of clear from the first episode. But the thing I liked about it was their morning after banter. There was no simpery. There was no maladying. None of that. There was straight up, honest, I had a good time. I hope you had a good time too. And yeah, don't bullshit me. You're coming back for more kind of thing. That cocky, manly kind of attitude. Which, yeah, speaks to the masculines in me. Yeah, he's definitely not simping. It's the way I wrote it on my notes. I'm just looking at my notes here. It's more tough guy sweet / smooth. Like it's, yeah, he's definitely not, subsuming or subverting himself for her. He's basically saying, look, we had fun, and I treat you on an equal playing field. Well, man to woman. Fair playing field. Let's see. There was a woke moment. Yes, the phrase glass ceiling had to be fucking dropped. I think, having seen that scene, I think the writer is basically, I think he's thrown in these terms more to get his script produced than anything else. I think it's just a case of, how to put it, satisfying the kissing the ring, we'll say. Which is really unnecessary, or unfortunate, because to me that sort of kissing of the ring is more reminiscent of the abominable kiss than anything to do with the Pope. Let's see. There's a scene where the young black fellow, Tyson, kind of, and there's a repeated thread of this through the show, where Manfredi has tried to discourage him from trying to follow in his footsteps, to try to discourage him from viewing him as some sort of father surrogate figure. And there's a point where Manfredi finally says, okay, enough is enough. You're clearly not going to be discouraged. So this is your choice. And this is the exact wording he uses. He looks him dead in the eye and says, this is your choice. And gives him the moment to make the decision. And Tyson does kind of, jump on it. And a little later in the show, we see a really good scene where he's kind of rehearsing for a sort of confrontation, a fictional confrontation, and you get the impression very rapidly that this kid is not as mature as he tries to come off. I did make a note that the the actor portraying Tyson's father, Michael Beach, and if I have that wrong, I do apologize. The pictures did look similar enough that I thought that was who I was looking at. But there's a moment where he overhears the things that Tyson is saying in his room, and he emotes so beautifully. It's really a pleasure to see someone without saying a single word, without really even seeing his facial expression, just emote with his body language. And you really sympathize with this father character, especially if you're a man in today's modern world, because you feel almost the inhibition that society has put on men, where the impulse is there to simply go in and immediately correct the behavior. And at the same time, there's also the conflict of, well, he's a grown man, but he's also living in my house, and I care about him, but I can't hold the leash too tight, if you understand. Stacy returns to the scene from the initial, earlier in the show, from the explosion, and discovers a stray dog, one of the dogs that the ATFs told are good boys. I do love how they played a little bit with the memery in this. But she takes him in, and it's kind of telling to her character that she takes in strays. It kind of gives a bit of light on her relationship, her attitude towards Dwight. There's a scene where Dwight goes to a ranch trying to investigate the attack that's perpetrated on him. This isn't really spoilery at this point. I do tend to hope that you've seen the show before you watch these. But there's a scene where he tries to pretend that he's a private investigator. And the ranch owner that he's talking to, when he offers to shake hands, there's a not really subtle cut to a view of the handshake and Dwight's shoes, which tells you that Dwight is really not a private investigator. They're very nice shoes. At least, I assume they are. I'm a guy, I don't really know these things. That said, a woman would pick up on it. And it's one of the things that women are known to do when they first meet someone, is to look at their shoes to determine what kind of person they are. Subtle clues to their background, things of that nature. It's very well played. It shows the business owner, Margaret, I believe her first name is Devereaux, to be a very, very shrewd person. Not someone who can have the wool pulled over their eyes easily. I suspect, and this is me theorizing completely out of my ass at this point, I suspect that she will eventually end up some form of ally to Dwight. I don't see a third wheel romantic entanglement sort of situation there at all. She's definitely a cowgirl, and I have the suspicion that at some point in the show she will be handling a gun. And probably extremely competently. I talked about that. This ends with Manfredi showing he's a bad guy. He goes after the guy who is from his past, and he has a gun in the car with him. It shows that he's a bad guy because he's willing to go and kill the guy. Obviously, you don't take a gun to a situation if you don't intend to use it, or have the idea that you might have to use it. But when Manfredi discovers that he's looking at a family man, the son comes out the door to greet the father. When he discovers that the guy is a family man, there's again some really great body language expression and emoting from Stallone. Again, continues to surprise me with his dramatic chops, which I suspect may be down to the director, because this is twice in this show that there is really good, very expressive body language used. But there's a moment where you can see in his eyes and his entire demeanor that he's basically resigned himself to not having this confrontation there. And that shows that while he may be a bad guy, he's definitely not an animal. So he's a very controlled individual. Honestly, I continue to be impressed with this show. And again, thank you to the Shademaster for suggesting it. I absolutely would recommend this show at the point of episode 3. I know people who've watched further and suggest to me that there's a couple of episodes more to go where things really start to kick off. This is about a third through the show. So I think for next week's review, I may do episodes 4, 5, and 6 together. Though I don't know for sure if I will. I like the idea of parsing it out episode by episode weekly. Partly because it takes the workload off me a little bit. Partly because, we all have schedules to keep. And if you guys decide, having watched episode 3, that you don't want to watch 4, 5, and 6 together right away, maybe you want to do, there seems to be a leaning towards the weekly viewing thing. I personally don't like it. I would rather binge, but tell you what, give me your thoughts. Would you rather I did a chunk of 3 episodes, or 2 or 3 episodes together? Or would you rather I parse it out weekly and do 1 episode a week? To me, scheduling can be an issue. And if I parse it out week by week, it still gives you the opportunity, if you wait until I finish episode 9, which is the end of the season. A note about that, IMDb lists 2 seasons, so I'm guessing it's been greenlit for another season. Or IMDb references a second season at least. Personally, I would like to see a second season of this already, so. But as far as the show goes, it's very good. I'm very much enjoying it. I will continue to recommend it at this point. Hopefully the wokery remains minimal. I think part of the kissing the ring may very well have been the poking at the ATF, the ACAB movement being what it is, having the influence it has. But yeah, if you ask me for my recommendation, definitely a recommendation, positive all the way. Yeah, and again, Stallone continues to surprise with his dramatic jobs. Again, maybe down to the directing, probably down to the actor. I mean, if I recall correctly, the guy did win an Oscar. In any case, folks, that's it for me for this one. I hope you're having a good day. I hope you continue to have good days. And as always, rise and rise again until lambs become lions. Bye-bye.